So guys, today we are going to discuss one of the new concept you can consider in ASP.NET Core, which was not initially available till .NET 5. This is introduced in .NET 6, right? What is this? This is minimal API. So what is minimal API? Why minimal API? How to implement minimal API? What is the difference between your traditional .NET Core controller-based approach to develop API and this minimal API? That is what we are going to discuss in today's session. So basically, I will take two sessions, right, today and tomorrow, to make you understand this concept called minimal API in ASP.NET Core. So first of all, you have to understand one thing. This is also used to develop web API. So like the controller-based approach, what we used to so far, right, or till now, right, whatever we use. So this is also another way. Yes, okay, let me change my network because currently today Wi-Fi is not available and I'm using my mobile network. Let me change. Guys, am I audible now? Better than previous? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So if you are guys facing any issue related to my voice, please let me know because today Wi-Fi is not available due to heavy rain. I don't know what is happening, and I'm using my mobile network, right? So okay. So minimal API means it is a new feature or a new concept which was introduced in .NET 6. Why it is introduced? Now, it is introduced to simplify, right? It is used to give more emphasis on simplicity, speed, and minimum repeatable code. So, for example, if you are going with the controller-based approach, then along with the middleware pipeline, we have to introduce the MVC pipeline. So, MVC pipeline in the sense what? Now, all the filters will come into the picture, routing will come into the picture, model binding will come into the picture, controller you have to create, action method you have to create, right? Many things you have to write. So if you are going to develop a simple project, right, simple microservice, or you can say simple API endpoint for performing some kind of a basic operations, then for that purpose, do I need a completely MVC based approach? No. Then what is the best approach? The best approach is to use minimal API. So with minimal API, what we will right get? We will see right. We will get what we are getting with the controller based approach. That is our main objective to perform the database operation using API. But in this case, we are not going to use any attributes, right? Attribute means what? Now you cannot create any action method where you are going to apply some kind of attribute. Attribute means filters, middle, right? Whatever custom filters, authorize attribute. So these are not possible. No controller, no action, no routing, no model binding, no attributes, nothing is there. So this is going to be very simple. It is going to, as you can see, the many things are reduced. That MVC pipeline is completely removed altogether. That means the performance is going to be very high. And again, it is going to reduce the repetitive code. So you do not need to create a controller class, action method, right? So these things are going to be reduced within the program class itself. Within the program class itself, you can define the endpoint. So what is this, how these endpoints are going to be defined, we will see. So before that, we need to understand some of the key feature of minimal API. One is lightweight approach. Definitely, it is going to be the lightweight approach because we are developing the API without the MVC routing, right? Functional approach, yes, it is going to be a functional approach. See, if you are going with the controller-based approach, you have to create the controller, then you have to create the action method, that is class and object. But with this approach within the program class, you have to define the endpoint. That is nothing but functional approach. Reduce the dependencies, right? Definitely, it is going to reduce the dependency on MVC pipeline. So there is no MVC pipeline will come into the picture with the right. What I can say, minimal API and focused use case. So this is basically used to develop right the APIs quickly And this API should not have the full MVC feature, right? So basically, if you are going to develop simple services or simple microservices without any complexities, then you need to use minimal API. For example, if you see when we start developing the application, we start with the basic one, right? Without using this controller based approach. So in that case, right, initial time we have used something like this app.mapget. So this is nothing but your URL or endpoint, and this is going to be your handler. Means what? When you invoke this endpoint, then this is what going to be returned to you. So in this case, this map get is going to define a get endpoint. So this map get method is going to define a get endpoint, and how you can access that endpoint, that is going to be this one. So whatever the first parameter, that is the endpoint URL. And the second one, what we are providing here, it is going to be lambda expression. You can say anonymous method, you can say lambda expression, anything is fine. So in that lambda expression, so whatever before this arrow mark, whatever we created, that parenthesis, right, what we are providing here. So this is basically used to take the input parameter. If your endpoint, for example, let assume this is your action method. Does this action method take any parameter? Yes, it is taking. So then those parameter you need to specify here. And after this right parenthesis, whatever your business logic, that what you want to execute, that what you need, right? So here we are simply returning a string. So then you might have one question, sir, what about the action method which is going to process business logic, which is going to consume some repositories, which is going to return some different kind of response like JSON response, no content depth, right? I mean, whatever the 200 status code, 400 status code, 204 not found status code, 500 internal server status code. So how we can return those things from this endpoint? Is that possible? Yes, it is absolutely possible. How? That is what we are going to discuss in today's session. Clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Right?
So, sir, is
Right?
there any unit testing possible also in this?
No, no, no. That is not possible. Right? So basically what I'm saying, that in this case, right, it is going to be very focused. Focused in the sense, fully MVC feature is not available. Getting my point?
Yes, sir. Yes.
That is not possible. So it is basically for creating simple services, right, where there is no right complexities involved. So now let us proceed and see how we are going to perform database CRUD operation on a simple employee model. Uh, so and how to create a minimal API in our project. I mean using Visual Studio. Let us proceed and understand this thing, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new project. ASP.NET Core Web API project. Give the project name, whatever you want to give. I'm going to create this project inside my projects folder. Click next button. Yes. See, guys, remember, whenever you are going to create a minimal API, please ensure this use controller box should not be checked. It should be unchecked. If you check this use controller option, so what exactly it means? It means it is going to use controllers instead of a minimal API. Getting my point? If you checked this checkbox, then what exactly it is going to do? It is going to enable the controller-based approach. Controller-based approach means what? Now, the default convention it is going to follow. It will create the controllers folder. Within the controllers folder, you have to create the controller. That approach will be enabled. But instead of that, if you are going to follow the minimal API, then what you need to do? You have to check this one. So if you unchecked this one, then it is going to use minimal API. And if you checked this check the box, right, do not use top level statement, then what will happen, right? If you unchecked this one, then that program class main method, that name will not be available. But again, it is up to you, right? Whether you want to keep the class name and the method name or not, doesn't matter, right? If you see, the class name, method name doesn't have any impact with the minimal API. If you want to keep the class name, method name, then check this checkbox. If you don't want, then uncheck this one, right? So next, click on the create button. right? So you can see the project is created. Now you can see there is no controller folder. There is no controller folder, and whatever the routing you can see currently it is defining one route map get, and that route is defined directly within the program class. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to perform the database CRUD operation step by step. Step by step in the sense I will start directly using the hard-coded data. Then I will show you how to create repositories. Then I will show you how to create how to implement asynchronous programming. Then I will show you how to use entity framework code to perform the database CRUD operation. Then I will show you tomorrow we are going to discuss some advanced concept like what is endpoint filter, how you can apply endpoint filter. And I'm going to also discuss how to implement how to implement authentication and authorization, right? All these things we are going to discuss tomorrow. So let us start and let us proceed and see how we can implement CRUD operation on the employee entity. Initially, I'm going to deal with the in-memory data, and later on I will show you how to integrate an entity framework code. So let me first go ahead and create a models folder at the project root directory. So this is going to be my folder, models folder, and inside this folder, I will create all our classes, right? So whichever required for our application. So let me go ahead and create the first class that is going to be employee. So this is the model class which is going to hold the employee information. So whatever information we are going to keep inside each employee entity, ID, name, position, and salary. So these are the properties that what we are storing. Clear till now? How to create a minimal
Yes,
API
yes.
project? How to create a minimal API project? Clear? Yes, it is clear. It should be clear. So there, and whenever you are creating minimal API means you should not have the controller based approach. Clear? Okay. Now, how to implement minimal API in ASP.NET Core? So basically, guys, remember with minimal API, we are going to perform four different kind of operations. One is get operation, one is post operation, one is put operation, and another one is delete operation, right? Other things are not available. These are the four basic operations that what we generally perform, and these four operations are available with minimal API. And to perform this four operation, get, post, put, and then batch, right, get, post, put, and delete, we have provided with four minimal API method. So we have provided with four minimal API method. What are these method? These method are map get, map post, map put, and map delete. And each method specify a specific HTTP var. What exactly it means? It means if we use map get, means it is targeting HTTP get var. If we are using map post, means it is representing HTTP post var. Similarly, put and delete in the same way. Now, now sorry. Now, using map get, right, what we are going to implement? We are going to implement two operations. So one operation going to retrieve all the employees. Another operation going to retrieve the employee by ID. Let assume we have a repository class. Let assume we have a repository class, and that class, right, and that class have some method. Like what method? If you think about the repository design pattern, what we have discussed recently, so a common repository class going to contain at least five methods. What are get all, get by ID, post, put, and delete. Let assume let assume the repository class going to have some method. One method is get all employees, another method is get by ID. So how we can use those method within our minimal API for from the get operation, please observe. See, first of all, for performing the get operation, we have to use this map get method. You can see this is going to be my map get method. This is the endpoint URL that is slash employees. This parenthesis what we used before this arrow, that parenthesis is going to contain the input parameter. And after this, if it is a single statement, you can directly write. Otherwise, you can write within this open and curly braces. Whatever the logic you have to execute, that what you need to write within this open and close curly braces. And here what I'm doing, I'm calling this get all employees method, and that method is going to return the data. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
In this case, whatever the data going to be written by this method, by default, that response will be converted into JSON. You do not need to mark action result, I action result, whatever. You do not need to mention, but automatically that is going to be converted into JSON. Similarly, if you want to fetch an employee by some ID parameter, based on the employee ID, you want to fetch the information. How you can do this? So in that case, first of all, you want to define the endpoint URL. So do you want this URL ID parameter as part of the query string or as part of the route? If as part of the query string, then you do not need to mention that parameter as part of the route. But if you are taking this as part of the route data, right? I mean, as part of the URL path, then you have to mention something like the employee slash ID as a placeholder. You know what is this placeholder? This placeholder going to contain some mandatory value, and here the same ID parameter is also there. So whatever the data coming in as part of the URL path, that will be replaced with this ID parameter. And as I mentioned before, this arrow, whatever the parameter we defined, that is input parameter. So this input parameter now I can use within this open and close curly braces. So here you can see I'm using the same ID parameter to get the employee by ID. And as I have mentioned, we can also return different types of a response, right? For example, if the retrieved employee is not null, then what we need to do, we need to return 2000 OK with the employee data. So for that purpose, what we need to do, results.OK. Similarly, if see in this case, right, earlier what we are writing directly okay. But at that time, that is a controller approach. So controller is inherited from the controller base class. So these methods are available. But in this case, what we need to do now, whatever the result we are going to return, whatever the response type we are going to return, that controller base class is not available here. So what we need to do, we need to use this result class and this OK static method. So we need to call this OK method and we need to return the data. Similarly, if you want to return not found, then you need to call results.not found. Similarly, result.ok, result.not found, result.internal server error, and all these method we need to use. Clear? Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. Similarly, if you are going to create a post, for creating a post means it should be a post request. And for post HTTP post for what method we need to use? We need to use map post method. And here you can see this map post method means what? We need the incoming employee object as an input parameter. Later on, I will show you how you can implement validation. By default, that data annotation based validation is not available here. You have to enable. How to enable, I will show you. So here you can see before the this arrow, whatever your input parameter, definitely in this case, the new employee. And here I'm using the add employee method to add the employee. And then I'm created, right? So here, okay means 200, not found means, right, 400 here created means 201. So that newly employee created, whatever the URL to access that employee and whatever the new employee information, that what we are returning. Similarly, in the case of a map put method, so what I'm doing here, you can see I'm defining the endpoint URL employee slash ID, and the ID, which employee ID you want to update, that what I'm taking as part of the route data. Also, whatever the updated employee information, that what I'm taking from the request body. So here, two input parameters are there. One is ID, which I'm getting from the route, and another employee object, which I'm going to get from the request body. Then logic is very simple. You know how to do this thing. Based on the ID, you need to fetch the employee information, check if the employee is available. That is fine. If not available, return not found. Then update the employee and return no content. Similarly, map delete method, here I'm taking the ID as part of the route, checking whether the ID is available or not. If calling this method to delete the, see, in this case also you can check whether the ID is available or not. Like this, right? This statement you can also put here. If available, then only you can proceed and delete the employee. If deleted, result no content. If not deleted, return not found. Clear?
Yes.
Yes.
So now let us proceed and see how we can implement this in our program class. See, guys, remember minimal API means you have to implement this within your program class. So whatever the existing program class, let us replace that code. And
Sir,
it's very
can we pass using query string data? Can we use?
yes, that is fine. So that is also fine. So what I have mentioned here, now in this case, right, for example, currently, right, this ID parameter. So if I'm not putting this ID parameter as part of the URL path, that ID parameter you need to pass in the query string. And that is what we have already discussed. Clear?
Okay, yes.
Right? So here we are putting that in the right URL path. If you remove this placeholder, then this is going to be taken from the query string. That is absolutely fine, and that's what we have already discussed many times, right? So now I'm creating the builder, and guys, remember, first of all, we should not have that add controller services. Why? Because we are not going to deal with the MVC request processing pipeline. Clear? So there should not be any add controller services or add MVC services or add MVC with view services. No such services should be enabled. Why? Because currently we are not going to deal with the MVC request processing pipeline. So now, once the builder object is created, first of all, if you are not using controller-based services, then how to disable the camel case naming convention? So for that purpose, what I need to do, I need to use this configure HTTP JSON options. So using this configure HTTP JSON option, I disabled the camel case naming convention. So basically, it is going to now use Pascal case. Pascal case means what? Whatever the name you provided, that name will use as it is. Clear?
Yes.
Right? Then this is a API endpoint Swagger. You know all these things. This is basically for enabling the Swagger. Then if the environment is development, then Swagger is enabled. So this is my in-memory list. Later on, I will show you how to move this data to a separate repository class. Again, I will show you how to use entity framework code. So for time being, we are hard coding the list of employee data. So this is my map get method, which is going to return the list of employee, right? And if you are getting confused or any other approach, so what you can do is you can also write something like this. Right, so that is also possible. For example, you can also write something like this. Clear? If it is a single statement, you can directly write, otherwise you can go with this approach. That is also absolutely fine. So basically, this parameter is going, this open and close curly braces, whatever we created here, this is going to take the input parameter. After this, you can write your logic within a open and close curly braces. And this is nothing but your endpoint URL. And this map get method mentioned, it is going to be accessible via the get HTTP request. Clear or not this endpoint,
Clear.
right? So this is going to be another get endpoint, but in this case, along with this employees, it is also going to take the employee ID parameter. So this is going to take from the route. And here I'm using that ID parameter to check whether any employee is available. If available, that employee will return with the OK HTTP status code means 200. If not available, then we will return 400.5. Clear? And this employee list is nothing but our this collection. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Now, here you can see this is going to the map put method. Put method means it is going to update the data. For updating the data, I'm taking the ID from the route and the updated employee information. So first of all, I'm checking whether the ID is available or not. So here you can also check right additional what I can say uh, validation that this ID and whatever ID I'm getting from this employee object should be matched. If not matched, then I can also return bad request. So that is also possible. For example, if you write something like this, if ID is not equals to updated employee dot ID, right? If this is not equals to, then what you can do is you can also return results dot bat request. Right? What bat request? ID mismatch. You can also write like this. Clear?
Yes.
Right? So you can also write. So in this case, writing this as it is a single statement, you can also remove this one. Right? So in this case, what I'm doing, I'm checking if the ID is available. If employee is available, that is fine. If not available, not found. If available, then whatever the name, position, salary, and whatever the updated name, position, salary, that what we need to update, right? And this is going to delete the employee. Is that clear? Clear, guys?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so let me save this one. Okay, update here. Now let me run the application and see whether it is working fine or not. See, employees. I'm getting the employee information or not? Employees, post method. So here, let me remove this ID, name, position, salary. So name test, position test, salary sum 100. See, that employee is also created. Clear? Similarly, get employee by ID. Yes, you want to, sorry, not this one. I want to pass the employee ID 1, and here I'm going to get the employee detail information. Clear, guys? Similarly, you can test the rest. So this is how the basic, the starting point of our employee, right? So direct route and handler mapping. So basically, wherever you define the route, there only this is going to be my handler, right? So then automatic parameter binding, automatically the input or parameter are going to be bound to this parameter, right? So this is also available. Return types and result, you can return different kind of return types like bad request, not found, okay, all these things are available. Middleware integration, right? So completely, right, this is going to be integrated. This is going to be used as a middleware, right? Other things, right? What a middleware integration means what? Now you can also create some other middleware. So middleware means what? As we already discussed, whenever we are developing the filters, they will be applicable at the action level. But middleware, they will be applicable to all the right endpoint, right? So there is no relation between middleware and the MVC pipeline. So middleware will execute irrespective of the MVC pipeline. So in this case also we can create some middleware like exception handling middleware. We can create something called a global right authentication middleware. That is also possible. That is what we are also going to discuss, right? So that middleware support is also provided now. Dependency injection in ASP.NET Core minimal API. So basically, dependency injection means what? Now, if you see, right, if you remember, whenever we discussed the controller-based approach, right, whenever we discuss the controller-based approach, controller classes or services classes, right, they can accept the dependency object from the right framework. For example, we created one repository class. That repository class can be injected into the controller class or services class via the constructor. Yes or no? So in the constructor, we can create a parameter, sorry, in the class, we will create a variable and the constructor will handle that. That is that what we have already discussed. Okay, let me open the project. Not the versioning one. So in this case, so this is my products controller and this product repository I'm injecting over. This is nothing but dependency injection. Dependency injection means what? the class which depends the object, right? The class which is going to need a object. Instead of creating that object, we need to inject that object. For example, within this product controller, perform the CRUD operation, we need the product repository. So in this case, we have two options. Either we can go ahead and create a product repository instance. If we do this, then that is nothing but tightly coupled. Instead of creating the product repository, what we are going to do, we are going to inject the instance. And that is for that purpose, we are creating a variable, and through the constructor, we are injecting that instance, right? So this is nothing but a dependency injection. So now what is our requirement? Our requirement is right now, right? So now what we are going to do currently, we are doing this operation here by doing a hard-coded list of employee data, and we are doing the operation here. So what is my requirement? My requirement is I will create the employee repository. I will create the employee repository, and I want to inject that repository here. And using that repository, I want to perform the operation. So how we can do this with minimal API? Let us see. So first of all, what I need to do, I need to create my repository interface. So go ahead, create a class file. So this is going to my iEmployee repository interface. So within this employee repository, iEmployee repository interface, I will define all my interface methods: get all employees, get by employee ID, add employee, update employee, and delete employee. So this is the method signature. Next, what I need to do, I need to implement this interface within the employee repository class. So let me go ahead and create a class file that is called employee repository. So inside this class file, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to provide the implementations. So the implementation is very simple and straightforward. Again, here I have declared a list of employees, and that list I'm initializing within the constructor. So from this get all employees method, I'm returning this list of employees. Get by ID, I'm returning by filtering the right employee by ID. This is add employee method. I'm checking if the employee count is greater than 0. Then whatever the number of employee ID, max ID value plus 1. Otherwise, if it is 0, then it is going to be by default 1. So that is what I'm doing. And after adding that employee, I'm returning that employee. So this is my update employee method. So, we are checking whether this employee ID is present or not. If it is present, then I'm going to update the employee. Otherwise, I'm going to return null. Right. Similarly, delete employee. I'm going to delete the employee. And before delete, I need to check whether the employee exists or not. If the employee not exist, I'm returning false. If it exists, I'm returning true. So this is my employee repository class. Now what I need to do is I want to use this employee repository in my application. So how we can do this? So first of all, we need to register this employee repository. So first of all, we need to register this employee repository within our program class. How? Now, using the builder.services, whatever way you want to implement, whether add singleton, add scope, and whatever. So for time being, I'm using add singleton. And once I communicate with the database, once I enhance this example with the entity framework code, at that time I will show you using the add scope, right? So why I'm using add singleton? Because I want to create only one instance so that whatever the new employees we added, they are going to be available throughout to all the application. So this is my so this statement is basically going to register that iEmployee repository. And for this iEmployee repository, whenever someone requested for this iEmployee repository instance, the framework is going to create a instance employee repository. How many times that instance is going to be created? Only once. And that instance is going to be reused, right? So once we have the employee repository instance, then how we are going to access this thing? Let us try to observe, right? So let me go ahead. So basically, currently you can see whatever the input parameter is required, you have to write here employee repository dot, what is the method, guys? Get all employees. Clear? So now the framework will take the responsibility, provide the instance. Clear? Yes or no? So this is how you are going to deal with. Similarly, let me update the rest of the methods. Right? Similarly, you can say this is employee by ID. I'm injecting my employee repository instance. I'm fetching the employee. If employee is not null, then I'm returning this. If null, then I'm returning this. Similarly, add employee. So this is my employee to be added. This instance will be provided by the framework. And using this instance, I'm calling this add employee method to create a new employee. Similarly, this is my update employee. This is my employee repository instance. Framework will inject. The logic is very common. Clear or not? How we can inject how we can inject the dependency object into our minimal API endpoint? Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Right now. Now let me now. Do I need this employee in memory list here? Not required. So you can safely remove this thing. Now with these changes, let me run the application and see whether it is working fine or not. See, I'm getting the response means all the APIs are also going to work as expected. Clear, guys? How to inject a dependency object to our minimal API endpoint. First of all, you need to register the service to the built-in dependency injection container. You can decide whether you need to go with a singleton, scoped, or transient. And once you register the service, then you can define one parameter right within your minimal API endpoint. And once you define the parameter, using that parameter, whatever method you want to invoke, you can invoke. Clear? Clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Now a request validation in minimal API, right? So for example, right, as you are already aware about it. So whenever we are implementing any kind of application without validation, right, it's very difficult to have, right, manage the data correctly. And we have already discussed there are two ways to implement validations. What are the way? First of all, using the data annotation attribute. Second option, using the Fluent API validations, right? So now for time being, what I'm going to do, right? For simple kind of validation, you can go with the data annotation. For complexity, you can go with the right Fluent validation, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to decorate my employee class with some data annotation attribute, and then I will show you how we can implement validation. So guys, remember, first of all, the model state that is valid is not available. Second, that API controller which we applied at the controller level is not available. That means what? That means the built-in validation, right? The built-in way provide the validation based on the data annotation attribute is not available. So what exactly it means? It means that validation, whatever we are going to do, we should do it manually. Manual means, so we need to write some kind of a custom logic, which is going to inspect the model properties, and that properties, then it is going to check for each property, whatever the data annotation attribute is applied, and whatever the value stored inside that properties, is that value satisfy those data annotation attribute or not. So that custom logic or that generic logic we have to write. So how we are going to do this? Let us see. If you are not using data annotation attribute, that's fine. Because if you are using Fluent validation, you know how to manually do the validation. So that is not a big deal. So Fluent API validation, the way you use with right, what I can say, ASP.NET controller-based approach, right? A controller-based approach. The same way you can use also here. But the way data annotation attribute work with a controller based approach, in the same way it is not going to work in our minimal API. So this part you can take by yourself, right? You can try this one by yourself, how you can implement, right, how to do the validation using Fluent API. So as there is some customization logic required for the data annotation, so this part I'm going to discuss here. So this is complicated, so I'm going to discuss this one. This is very simple and straightforward, so you can do it by yourself, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify my employee model with some validation. So let me go to the employee class. See, so inside this employee class, first of all, I'm not going to provide any validation for this ID property, but validation will be provided for name, position, and a salary. So name, whenever I'm going to create an object, it should have a valid value, and the value should not be greater than 100 characters. Similarly, position, it should be, the client should provide some value and it should not be greater than 50 characters. Salary means it should be within this particular range. Clear? Now, if you want to apply the, right, what I can say required attribute, that is also possible. See, salary is required. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Copy and paste it here. Okay. Now what I need to do? See, as there is no API controller, as there is no model start that is valid, which are part of our MVC lifecycle, these are not available here. And how we can do this validation? So basically, what we need to do, we need to create a custom generic class. That class can take any type of a model, right? And then we need to inspect each property of that model. Then we need to check whatever all validation attributes are applied on each individual property, and whatever the value stored inside that property is that value satisfy those validation or. So that's what we need to do manually. So for this purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a validation helper class, and this helper class is going to have one right method. That method is going to do the validation. So let me go ahead, create a class file, validation helper, and this class file is going to have one static method, and that static method is going to do the validation. So first of all, so this is my class, static class. So static class means what? Now all the members must be static. So that is the reason why I have created one try validate method, and this validated method, right, is a generic method. Why generic method? Because here we are specifying the generic type parameter T. So instead of a T, you can give any name, right? You can give ABC, your name, PQR, whatever. So don't think that T is right constant or you should always use T. No. But yes, generic type means we are using T, but that doesn't mean you cannot use anything else. For example, I can use P. P is also possible, right? So that is fine. So it is just a name. So let us go with the standard T. So here you can see this method is going to return some Boolean value. This Boolean value is going to indicate whether all the validation passed or failed. If passed, it is going to return true. If failed, it is going to return false. And in this case, this T model is nothing but the model being validated. Employee model, student model, product model, category model, whatever model you want to validate it, that model you need to pass as the first parameter. Second parameter is the validation result. So validation result, as you can see here, this is a output parameter. Output parameter means what? Now means while this model is being validated, for each property, whatever all validation issues are there, those informations we are going to store here. So while I'm validating this model, for each property of this model, whatever all validation error are there, those validation error we are going to store inside this validation result. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So first of all, as this is an output parameter, it is mandatory for us to initialize this. Otherwise, it will give you error. See if there is some issue or not issue, that is fine. So first of all, I'm initializing this with an empty result, right? Empty list of validation, because I don't know whether there is some validation issue or not. So initially, it is safe to initialize this with the default, or you can say empty result set, right? Then whatever the model we are going to validate, that should not be null. If the model is null, then definitely the data is not available. If data is not available, then what properties value we are going to check? So we need to ensure this model should not be null. If model is null, then what I need to do? I need to add one validation result that model instance cannot be null. And what we need to return here? This validation context, right? Create a validation context, right? Which will include the model's metadata. So what exactly it means? So this validation context, right? This validation context is going to contain the model's metadata. So what metadata it means? It means what is the actual instance, right? For example, in this case, you are storing the model object. That is fine. What is the type? If in each type, whatever all properties are there, in each property, whatever all data annotation attributes are applied. So all these informations are going to be contained inside this validated context method. So whatever model you pass, so you have to pass that model to this validation context. This validation context will take the responsibility, inspect this model object. So so for example, if you are passing employee, so it will check on this employee object whatever all properties are there. What is the type of these properties? Whatever all information, I mean, whatever the data annotation attributes are applied, so all these informations are going to be stored inside this validation context. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Now you might have one question, sir, why we need this validation context? See, this model, whatever we are having with, that model is going to contain only the data. But how that data is going to be validated? That information we need or not? Yes or no? For example, if you create one employee object, you are passing the name as a text and position as HR, salary as 10. That is fine. That is the model data. Whether that name what you pass, whether that position what you pass, whether that salary what you pass, or whatever the data stored inside this model, so those data are valid or not. For doing that validation, we need the model metadata. So model metadata means what is the type of this model. So the type is going to be employee. So in employee class, whatever all properties are there, what is the type of each property, whatever all validation attributes are applied. So all these informations are going to be stored or by this validation context, and this is required for doing the validation. Clear? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now, so once we have the model object, once we have the validation context, once we have the validation result, right, which is going to store the model validation errors, then what we can do is we can call this try validate object method on the validator class. So to this method, whichever object you want to validate, that object, how that object is going to be validated, that is validation context. If there is some validation error, on which variable we want to store this validation error, that is validation result. And for nested validation means what? Now, for example, this is employee object. It might be possible that this employee might be contain some custom class, right? For example, I'm having one address class, right? Public class address, right? For example, so here I'm having this address ID, right? Public string line one. Right? For example, let assume, right? So if this complex object we are applying here, right? Public address, address. Right? If I'm applying this one, so this is going to be a complex object. That is the nested entity. So this is my main entity. Main entity contain another entity. So this is going to be a nested entity. So do you also want to validate that nested entity? Yes. Then set this value to true. Clear? Clearer.
Yes, sir.
So this is the first parameter is the model, which is going to be validated. The second parameter is the validation context, which is going to contain the model's metadata, which we are going to be used to validate the model properties values. Validation result, this is the variable, which is going to hold all the validation errors, if any. And true means it is going to enable that nested validations. So this is what we need to do, right? So once this validate helper class is completed, right? Next, what we need to do, we need to implement that request validation within our endpoint. So in which endpoint we need to do the validation, guys? In which endpoint? See, if you go to program class, do I need any validation inside this get endpoint?
No.
No.
Do I need any validation here? Yes or no? No.
Yes.
So do Need any validation here? Yes. So we need to validate this employee object. So what you need to do, you have to create. So already this is going to my validator helper class. It is a static class. This is a static method. So directly I can use this static class and call the static method. We need to specify what is the model being validated, and this is the model object and the output variable. So that's what I need to pass. So here, this is my model that is going to be validated, and this is my output variable. So this output variable going to also instead of a var, so you can also directly use this one, list of a validation result if it is available here. See, you can also directly use this one. So if you are not sure what data type to be used, use var. That is also. So now, once you call this try validate method by passing the object being validated and the output to validate result parameter, then what will happen? It will do the validation. It will check each individual properties, do the validation. If validation succeeded, that is fine. If validation failed, we are using this not operator. So in that case, what we need to do, we need to return bad request. So in bad request, we are creating a JSON object. That JSON object is going to contain two properties. One is validation failed and the error. So that error means validation errors. And we are only selecting all the individual error message property, right? And then this is our normal create method, right? Similarly, uh, again, while updating the data, we also need to validate this one. So, but in this case, that validation is going to be updated employee. Clear?
Yes.
Right? So with these changes, let me run the application and see whether it is working as expected or not. So for example, I'm using that post method, right? And to this post method, what I'm doing here, I'm sending salary as minus 100 and calling this method. So what I'm getting, salary must be between this and this, right? And now what I'm doing here, I'm removing this position parameter itself. Now check what I'm getting, position is required, salary must be this and this. Clear? Right? So other option is that, right? For example, you can also do something like this. For example, so return bad request. Now, if you don't want this one, you want to return the complete validation errors. So in that case, you can pass this one, right? So with these changes, now run the application that completely all the validation errors you will see. So this is my position. So I just remove these two parameters and call this one. See? The member name, position, error message, position is required. Member name, salary, error message, salary is required. So this is how you are getting. So now, right now, what I'm doing here, now I'm not accessing these member names. Rather than I'm issuing the select statement, which is going to retrieve all the error message property values like this. So whichever approach you like, you can go ahead. If you want to display the error message in this way, that is fine. If you only want to display the error messages by using an array, that is, in that case, you need to use this approach. Both approaches are. So whatever you like, you can do. Clear?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is how you can implement, right? So difference, you know already, minimal API and then controller-based approach. Minimal API means it is basically its main emphasis is on simplicity, simpler syntax, performance, and rapid development, but not suitable for complex applications. Controller-based approach means suitable for controller-based approach, right? So basically, if you are going to develop a completely complex application and if you want to utilize the complete MVC feature, then you have only one option, that is controller-based approach. If you want to develop a simple API, you do not want to make your application more complex, then in that case you need to go with a minimal API approach. Other than this, read the theoretical concept you can read, right? So I mean, what are the things available, how to set up, right? Whatever we discuss practically, that what you can, right? I have also been provided here with theoretically. you can read and you can be prepared for right interview. Next, what I'm going to discuss, right? I'm going to discuss another important concept, that is error handling and log. So basically, whenever if we are developing any kind of a real-time application, if there is no proper error handling and if there is no proper logging, means no use. There is no use. So basically, for example, if some unexpected behavior occur, some scenario occurred where we are not handling the error gracefully, then your application is going to give some kind of a responses which it doesn't looks good for the end user. Similarly, if we are not implementing logging, then what happening to our application, whether the application performs correctly or any issue any at any given point of time, how you can investigate, how you can debug such issues, how you can fix those issues without this logging. So basically, error handling and logging are very, very important to make your application run smoothly, right, work smoothly. And for that purpose, it is very, very important for us to implement error handling as well as also important to implement logging. So now what we are going to discuss, we are going to discuss how to implement error handling and logging in our ASP.NET Core web API. So for this purpose, what I'm going to do, for error handling, we are going to create a global middleware. If you remember, whenever I'm discussing the filter concept, at that time I have mentioned there are two ways to implement exception, right? Global error handling. You can create a global exception filter, or you can create a global error handling middleware. And for that particular scenario, it is better to go with a middleware component. So basically, I'm going to show you how you can create a custom middleware component. Uh, and how you can register that custom middleware component to handle all the errors which is going to be thrown. Also, at the same time, I'm going to show you how to implement logging. For logging, you have multiple options. You can use log, you can use Serilog, right? Third-party logging provider. Even if you want, you can also make use of the default logging provider, which is going to log the information into the console window and the debug window. And we have already discussed how to implement Serilog, how to implement nlog. So I'm not going to touch those parts at all. In this case, I'm going to show you how to log the information into the console window, right? So let us proceed and see how we are going to implement this thing. So first of all, I'm going to create a global error handler middleware. So this middleware, I'm going to create inside my models folder. You can create a separate folder called middleware. There you can create with simplicity, right? I'm creating this inside my models folder still. So as you know, right here you can see I'm using this request delegate. So first of all, you have to create a variable of a request delegate. It is mandatory. What exactly this request delegate is going to do? Can anybody tell me? What is the job of this request delegate?
It will call the next middleware.
Exactly. It will call the next middleware which is registered into the application pipeline. And this statement, whatever I have created here, it is basically going to log the data. So log the data means in this case, it is going to be error handler middleware, right? So it is going to log the information. So whichever class, right, on whichever class you are going to implement logging, so that class name you need to pass. So this is going to log so that at the time of logging, it is going to tell this log statement, it belongs to this class file. And then within the constructor, what I'm doing, I'm initializing this to next and logger. And then I'm calling this in, I'm implementing this invoke async method. So this is the method which is going to be invoked when this middleware is registered into the application processing pipeline. Framework will automatically invoke this invoke async method whenever we register this error handler middleware into the request processing pipeline. So in this case, as we are going to implement error handling, so how and what is the best approach? Best approach means anything, whatever going to be executed, that must be executed as part of the try block. If executing the corresponding or the following middleware component, if any exception occurred, if those exceptions are not handled by the corresponding middleware or components or handler components, then that exception definitely going to be handled by this catch. So here, whatever the next middleware component, that what we are calling, then here we are storing this in a message that an exception has been occurred. whatever the current exception details that what we are logging. So here we are going to, after logging the exception, what we need to do, we need to provide some kind of a custom error response, right? So for that purpose, we are creating this response stream object, setting the content type as application JSON, setting the status code as internal server error, the response object, whatever you want to return, that what you can return. Here I'm returning an unexpected error occurred, that title. The status means that 500 status code, which we have already set here. The same thing we are setting here. You can also set 500 directly here. The detailed error message, do you want to expose or not? For example, if the environment is development, then we need to return the detailed exception error information. Otherwise, we need to return this please contact shop. So how you can do this? First of all, we will access, right? We will get the iWeb host environment service, right? By using this get service method. Once we got the iWeb host environment service, then we are going to check whether the environment is a development or not. If the environment is a development, then the error message, whatever we are getting, that what we will return to the client, I mean, in the development environment. Otherwise, this message is going to be displayed. So once your JSON response is ready, I mean this anonymous object is ready. So we need to convert that anonymous object into JSON, and then we need to write that JSON into the response stream. Clear? Or anyone having any issue? See, this is one of the way to get the requested service instance. So as we have already discussed, so we have multiple options. You can define the controller, right? You can inject the instance, right? Dependency object instance using constructor. You can get the request for the service as part of the controller action method. Otherwise, you can also request for the service directly within the logic by calling this get service method. So once you have the iWeb host environment service instance, then you can call the each development, each staging, each production to ensure on which environment it is running. So this each environment is going to return true if the environment is development. And that environment we have already set where in the log syntax.json file. So the current environment is a development. So whichever right approach you are running, I mean whether you are using IIS or whether you are using right what I can say, whatever HTTPS, HTTPS Express, whatever. So corresponding all the environment is set, right? So now, so this is my custom middleware component what I have created now. Second thing is I need to enable logging. So logging configuration needs to be provided in the app settings.json. I'm going with the default option. So log label is going to be information, and I mean the default is information. For Microsoft.ASP.NET Core namespaces, it is going to be warning, right? So that is what I have said, and we have already discussed, right? This logging log label, all this thing, whatever the right different kind of log level trace debug information warning error, so all these things we have already discussed, so I'm not giving more emphasis on this logging concept. So now what I need to do, I need to implement error handling and logging in my application. See how we can do this. Let me copy this code. So go to the program class, copy this code. Okay. See, first of all, right, you can configure logging. So here I'm specifying that I'm clearing any default provided. I'm enabling console and debug logging. So if you want to enable Serilog LL, you know how to do this. For that purpose, if you are new or if you are not aware about how to implement Serilog and LL, just go and watch the logging sessions what we have already discussed. So this statement is going to disable the name, right, common case naming convention. So this is enabling the Swagger integration. This statement is for registering the employee repository. This is if the environment is a development, then we are showing that Swagger interface. And this is the middleware component what we registered before the endpoint middleware. So before any endpoint middleware, right, like employee get by employee ID port, whatever. So I'm registering my custom middleware component. So app.use middleware. So I'm registering my custom middleware component. So basically, so if you are invoking this endpoint class employees, Then first this endpoint, this middleware will execute, and this middleware when call this next method, then only this endpoint will invoke. Clear? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. Now here you have to remember two things, right? So what I'm doing here, first of all, I'm injecting my repository. So I employ repository, that is fine. So that what we have registered as a singleton, that will come here. And in this case, I want to implement logging. So I want to inject also iLogger. So this logger service is already available with the ASP.NET Core framework. You do not need to do anything special. And this HTTP context object, this is the third parameter what I'm using. Why I'm using this parameter? Because I want to check the core string parameter, right? So basically, I want to demonstrate the error scenario. So for that purpose, I'm using this HTTP context object. Otherwise, there is no requirement of this context object in your project. So now what I'm doing here, I'm logging the information that fetch all employees. I'm fetching the core string parameter. So http.request.core, so it will return me a dictionary, or you can say collection of all core string parameters. So whatever the core string parameter you provided, all the core string parameter it will receive. And here it will check, is the core string parameter contain one key with the name cause error? If it contain, then is that value is true? If true, then it is throwing this error. Otherwise, it will call the get all employees method, and whatever the data you want to return, that what you are returning. So in this case also, I'm implementing the try catch implementation, right? But if you don't want to use this try catch implementation, that is also fine. Why? Because we have already implemented this global error handling middleware. That middleware is already having this try catch implementation. But again, if you are not using that global error handling middleware, then you can also implement this try-catch middleware component, right? Try-catch approach. So in this case, what I'm doing here, please observe, right? So I'm logging the error information. If the error is thrown, that error response I'm going to return. So I'm going to return the response using this problem. Similarly, this result.ok200, result.not found, result.bad request. Similarly, whenever you want to return some internal server error, then you have to use this result.problem method, right? So this problem method having 5 properties: detailed stack trace, instance title. Another one is also there, even I just forgot. So detailed, instance, status code, title, and the type. Type means the class name, right? Where this error is being generated, right? So in this case, the detailed means some error information you want to respond. Status code means 500. Instance means what is the path. Path means on which endpoint this error occur. That path I'm returning. And the title means any human readable title you can give. Clear? Clearer?
Yes,
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 sir. Clear.
Similarly, this is a employee by ID. I'm logging the information. I'm just implementing some logging statement, right? And in case of an error, I'm returning. See, digital, I'm returning, status, I'm returning, title, I'm returning. So this instance, if you want, that is fine. If you don't include, then automatically that instance is going to be set by this problem method. So you do not need to set that. That's what I'm showing here. So here I'm including that instance, but here I'm not including that instance. Even though I'm not including it, by default that will be included. And I will show you also that. So this is my rate map post method. See, I'm taking the repository object, employee object, and this is the logger instance, right? And then I'm logging the information. So if you just write to my previous example, I have just included few more logging statement. And more importantly, I'm implementing the try catch block. And in the catch block, I'm returning a problem object, which is going to return a well formatted JSON response, right? So that JSON response is going to be formatted. Otherwise, what you can do, you can manually create a JSON object, manually return. That is possible. But why we should do this thing manually? Then take the help of this problem class. This result class problem method. Same thing I'm doing for the put method also. Clear or not? Clear or not?
Yes.
Right. So now with these changes, let me run the application and see whether it is working fine or not. Okay. So let me run the application. So get employees. See, I'm getting the data. Now to make you understand that error scenario, so we need to pass one core string parameter. What should be that parameter value? Cause error. So cause error equals to true. If I pass true, so exception throwing, and once the exception thrown, so you can say type. Type means what? It will provide a documentation, or you can say path where you can get more information about the type of error. For example, 500. 500 means internal server error. So this type is going to give more information about the 500 status. So once you open this one, write that link, it is going to return that 500. See, 500 internal server error, and that error information it is showing here automatically set. Title, internal server status, what we set, detail, what we set, instance, this is. So instead of this error information, if you want, you can also set your custom error information. I mean custom page. For example, in this case, right? In this case, so what I'm doing here, type equals to, I'm specifying one, right? What I can say, custom error. So so this is going to be type, right? So here, what I'm doing here, for example, I'm setting this error page here, right? So this page I have set here. So with these changes, now if you run the application, then you will see that whatever the path we have provided, URL path we have provided to get more information about the present or the current error, that what it is going to show. Clear? So this is going to give you more information about the error, that custom path we have set. That is the error title, error status code, detailed error message, and instance means on which endpoint this error is being thrown. Clear or not? Now, if we do not specify this type and instance, what will happen? We do not specify this type and instance. See what will happen. See, type is there, title is there, status is there, detail is there. So that is what it is happening. Right? So this type, if you provide, that is fine. If you not provide, that will be same. And the rest of the thing you have to provide, including the instance, right? So instance means a requested path where the exception is being thrown. So this is the method or endpoint that what you need to set. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this is how you can implement error handling in your application. Clear? How to implement logging and how to implement error handling. Error handling with a try catch approach, error handling with a global middleware, right? For example, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you global error handling middleware. So now this statement I have commented, and here I'm going to write this statement. I'm going to write this statement, right? So currently, there is no try catch block, but as currently there is no try catch block, definitely this will come into the picture, right? So let's see whether it is coming into the picture or not. I copy this one. See? Now, the JSON response, what we returning from our error handling middleware, title, status, detail. So that is what coming. Clear?
Yes.
Right? So this is how you need to implement error handling and logging in your application. Next, what I'm going to show you asynchronous programming, right? So if you are developing any API, definitely that API is going to deal with the database. Database means performing the IO operation. It's not always database. You can also consume some file operation. You can consume some network operations like consuming some other services. Right? So basically, whenever we are dealing with IO operation, so basically whenever we are dealing with the IO operation, input output operation, then definitely we need to use asynchronous programming. And to implement asynchronous programming, what we need to do, we need to use the async keyword to mark the method as asynchronous. First point is you have to mark the method as async by using the async keyword. Second one, you have to use the method return type as a task or a task of a T. If you want to return void, you have to use the return type as task. If you want to return any data, integer, list of employee, string, then that data what you want to represent or return, that what you need to use here using this T parameter. For example, I want to return list of employees. Then the return type is going to be task of list of employees. No, I want to return a single employee. Then the return type is task of employee. So this T is going to specify what data you want to return from the asynchronous method. And definitely, whenever you are creating any asynchronous method, you should use this async keyword, right? Pause the execution of the method until the asynchronous operation completed. Once the method completed, then only it will proceed to the next statement. This async keyword not only to pause the execution of the method till the execution is completed, but also it releases the thread. The thread which is executing the application code, that thread is going to be released, and that thread is going to do some other operation so that our application scalability will going to increase. More number of requests our application can handle, and better response time the user will get. The user will not wait a longer period of time to get the response. So better response means better user experience. So let us proceed and see how we can implement this in our application. So first of all, what changes we need to do, guys? First of all, we need to mark the method as asynchronous. So what we need to do? So instead of a return type this list of employee, you have to mark the return type as task of a list of employees. So you have to return this one. So task. So this is going to be task of an employee. So this is going to be task of an employee. This is also going to be task of an employee. The first changes should be this one. This is going to be task of an employee. Clear? This changes is clear. First of all, whatever the interface, right? Mark the method return type as a task of a T, task or a task of a T. So once this changes is done, then what will be the next changes? Guys, tell me. So next changes is you have to mark the method as async. Clear? The return type is definitely going to be task of a T. Clear? So you have to mark the method as this task of a T. So let me do this thing for all the methods. So you have to mark the method as right, what I can say async, and the return type is going to be task of a T. So this is the second changes that what we need to do. So once this changes is done, then definitely your method should have some await statement. Otherwise, it will behave like a synchronous method. See, in this case, we are dealing with this in-memory data, but in real time, you need to use something called find async. You have to use something called add async. You have to use something called a to list async. So those method you need to use to make the operation right to make the database operation async. But that purpose, what I'm going to do here, I'm not going to use that async. So instead of that I'm going to use task.delay to make sure that operation takes some times while communicating with the database. So time span dot from seconds. So basically, I'm delaying the execution for 1 second, assuming this is the time taken to perform the database operation. So that is what I need to use. So in all the method, I'm going to do this thing. Clear? Till now, clear?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is
Yes.
done. So once this is done, then next what is the changes? The next changes what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this method as async. Right? Basically, what exactly we need to follow the standard. Get by async, add employee async, update async, and delete async. Same thing I'm also going to do inside my repository class. So get all employees async, get employee by IT async, add employee async, and update employee async. So this is, so basically we are explicitly mentioning that this is our asynchronous method. So we need to follow the industry standard. I'm starting with the very simple example. I'm trying to convert this with the real-time implementation. So you have to follow the same pattern. So once this is done, then definitely our application is not going to work as expected. So let me go ahead. Okay, so let me remove these things. Now what I need to do next? Next, what I need to do means, right? So for example, right, now you can see this get all employees method, right? It is throwing some
Async.
error, right? So that method we need to mark as async, right? So, and here what you need to do, I need to use the await keyword. Clear? But as soon as I write the await keyword, you have to observe one thing. Automatically, that lambda expression also become async. I have not mentioned this is async, but automatically this becomes the async. Clear? For example, let's take this example. Now, is this lambda expression marked as async?
No.
Yes or no?
No.
Yes or no?
No.
If I want to call any asynchronous method, and if I want to use the await keyword, what it means? It means the method itself must be async. For example, in this employee repository, I can only use this await keyword if this method is async. If the method is itself not async, can I use this await keyword?
No.
No.
Okay, let us understand this thing, right? For example, get employee. So this is not the asynchronous method. This is a synchronous method, right? So as it is a synchronous method, so here can I use this await and all these things? No. Why? Because this is not a synchronous method. If you are using await means it must be a asynchronous method. That's what you need to understand. See, in this case, if I want to use the asynchronous method here, if I want to call any asynchronous method, then this lambda expression or anonymous method, whatever you tell, right, consider this method also needs to be async or not. If it is not async, then how I can invoke any async method? That is not possible. So what I need to do next, I need to use this async keyword here. And please observe, as soon as I write the await keyword, that async keyword automatically placed. Now, if I remove this async keyword, then I will get the error. Why? Because you cannot call any async method from a non-async method. So you have to use this one. Clear or not? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Similarly, what I need to do, I have to use this add async method. Here you need to use the await keyword, and here you have to use the async keyword, right? Similarly, you have to use your object employee async. You have to use the await keyword. Automatical async is also there. Here you can mark this method as async. You can start from here. You can mark this method as async, and here you can make this method as await. Clear? Anyone having any question? Clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Clear.
So now what I'm going to do is, so from this object, I want to remove this HTTP context because I don't want this section. Okay. Now run the application and see whether the operations are performed as expected or not. Get employees, getting the data, post employees, adding the data, get employee by ID. I'm also fetching the data. Right? So this is working as expected, right? Clear or not? How to implement asynchronous programming with minimal API? Anyone having any question? Yes or no?
Clear. It's clear.
No.
Clear.
Now, yes, anyone having any query? Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I want to enhance this example, right? Currently, if you look at the employee repository class, then it is going to deal with the in-memory data. So instead of in-memory data, now what I'm going to show you is how to communicate with the database. So basically, I'm going to show you how to use Entity Framework Core to communicate with the database to perform database CRUD operations. So already we have the employee model. So this employee model is there. So based on this employee model, I want to create a database table. So for that purpose, I want to integrate Entity Framework Core with SQL Server. So first of all, what package we need to install? We need to install these two packages. Right? We need to install these two packages. And what is the use of this package? This package will enable Entity Framework Core for SQL Server provider, and this is going to help you to generate the migration and update the database. So let me first go ahead and install these two packages. So this is my package. I'm installing this package. Okay, so that package is installed. The second package I also need to install because I want to generate the migration file, update the database to sync our model with the database. So this is fine. But in this case, right, what I'm going to do is, right, I'm going to do some changes. What changes? So by default, it is going to be 18, comma 2. So, right, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to introduce the column data annotation attribute here. I'm going to generate this one. Clear? So now, because if I'm not providing this by default, what is the column size? You have no idea. So it will give you one warning and it will create that using 18, comma 2, but we will get one warning to avoid that. For example, let assume we are providing that 12, comma. So this is what we are going to give the data column size for the salary column. So once this is done, once we have installed the what I can say packages. Next, what we need to do, we need to create our DB context. So let me go ahead within the models folder, create a class file called the application DB context. So this class file will going to contains the DB set property and some initial seed data. So basically, it is going to have this employee DB set property. This base class calling this model builder doesn't make any sense. You can remove because remove, and to this class, I'm initializing two employees, right? So employee ID 1, employee ID 2. I'm providing this initial seed data, and my DB set is going to be employee, which is going to contain a property called employees. These employees will be created as a table in the database, and that employees table will be mapped with my employee entity. And when the table is being created, it is also going to be inserted with your employee data. And whenever you are using the hatch data method, you have to provide the value for each column, right? If you look at the employee entity, you might be have one question, sir, in employee entity class, this is going to be our identity column. Then why you are providing the explicit value? Yes, whenever you are using hatch data method, you have to provide explicitly value for each column. Doesn't matter whether that is the primary key column, doesn't matter whether that is the identity column. For every column, you have to provide some fixed value. Dynamic value is not available. So that what we have provided, right? So once this is done, next what we need to do, we need to provide the connection string. So here we need to provide the connection string within the settings.json file. So this is my connection string, minimal API DB. So, okay, so let me go ahead. Okay, okay, minimal DB. So let me create this one as a minimal DB. Right? I'm not using that SQL Server data as opening. I will show you this thing here also. So the database is going to be minimal DB. Okay, so let me open this one. So this is going to my database. Next, what I need to do, I need to use the repository to perform the CRUD operations, right? So for this purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm going to modify the repository class. So go to the employee repository class. Now currently it is dealing with the database. So now you can see uh, I'm initializing this context object. Using this context object, I'm now going to do the operation over the database. Context.employees to list, context.employees find async, context.employees.add, update, right, delete. All these methods are implemented now with the database, not with the in-memory data. Clear? Clear or not?
Yes, chef.
Yes. Okay. So next, what I need to do, I need to register my what I can say application DB context class. So let me go ahead. So go to the program.cs class file. So before this read build method, I need to register. So here you can see I have configured my application DB context to use a SQL server and get the connection string from the app settings.json file with the key name default connection. That what I have specified here. Do I need to make any changes to my read repository methods? Endpoint method? No. Why? Because it is using the repository and this is the benefit of loosely coupling. Even though you have moved from right in-memory collection to database, our repository is going to be on our. Clear?
Yes.
So with these changes, next what guys? Next we need to generate the migration file, right? So let's do this thing. So go ahead and create the migration. What command I need to use? Add migration mig1. Okay, so there is some mistake. MIGRATIO and migration mig1. Okay, so basically it is saying that now you just tell me what is the issue with this. So in this case, right, if you look at our DB context is registered as a DB context is registered as what type of a service by default? It is transient, scoped, or singleton.
Just a singleton.
Sorry?
Supposed to be transient, but it's registered as
No, my
it's
question
supposed to
is,
be
in this
scoped.
case, my application DB context class is registered as a singleton service or scoped service or transient service. By default, this add context method register the DB context instance as a what type of a service instance? Single scoped, right? 100% it is going to be scoped. Now, the repository class we registered as a singleton or scoped or transient.
Singleton.
So how a singleton service can use the right scoped service? So basically there is some issue. The issue is, so now the repository class is going to deal with DB context, going to use DB context class to perform some database operations. So definitely a singleton service cannot consume the scoped service. A scoped service can consume the singleton service, that is fine. But a singleton service cannot consume the scoped service, right? So in this case, if you go to the repository, it is using the scope. So how a singleton service can consume the scoped service? That is not possible. So for that purpose, what I need to do is I need to make this as a scoped service. Clear? And it is the thumb rule from the day one I have mentioned it. Whenever you are going to deal with some database operation, you have to use scoped service, and that is what I have to do here. Clear?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Right? So with these changes now, let us try to generate the migration file one more time and see whether we are getting this error or not. Now we do not have any error. Now let me generate the database and then sync with our model. Now you should have the minimal database, minimal DB database. So you should see this is my minimal DB database. So here you should have that employees table. So with these changes now, if you write now, just go ahead and perform the database operation. It should work as expected. Now, if you want to retrieve the data, you are getting the data. Clear? Get by ID. Yes, you can also get the employee by ID. Clear or not?
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
So
sir.
this is you need to perform. So this is all about for today's session. Tomorrow we are going to discuss some advanced concept like how to use what I can say, how to use endpoint filter, something new in minimal API. We are also going to discuss how to implement the JWT authentication with minimal API. Anyone having any question, they can ask me. And guys, remember, Monday we are going to discuss unit testing. Saturday or Sunday, we are going to have one session, right? Only for the morning batch student. I'm going to show you how to deploy the application into IIS, how to create the SSL local SSL certificate, how to deploy the application into IIS with SSL certificate, how to manage all these things. That is what I'm going to discuss. And for that purpose, I'm going to create one MVC application. Evening batch student, it is optional for them. If they want to join that Saturday or Sunday session, I'm not decided yet. They can join. But again, Monday, two session will take discussing the unit testing, right? And after unit testing, your syllabus is going to be covered over.
Sir, is it possible to show how to publish in the Azure service app?
No. That Azure is completely right. What I can say, cloud computing part, right? So it's in coming days, right? If possible, I can take one session, right? Because for that purpose, I have to make my Azure account ready, right? Uh, right. Currently, I have not created my. I mean, I have not created my Azure account. So once I create, then I can show you. Otherwise, right? You have to join the Microsoft Azure course to learn about Azure things,
Okay, sir.
right? And even in case of microservices session, I'm going to show you how to deploy the microservices into Microsoft Azure.
Okay.
For time being, I'm going to show you how to host the application into IIS. How to publish the file, what are the different way to publish the file, right? How to deploy the application, how to create the application, what is the app pool, how you can reset the app pool. So all these things we are going to discuss. Okay. Yeah. Anyone having any question, guys?
No, sir. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So tomorrow we have a session and we'll continue whatever things are remaining
Thank you.
that we'll discuss today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.